I think I read recently, your why is important, but your who is more important. In other
Mm,
words, who do you want to become? Because
right.
your why could be, I want to do it for my kids, right? Which is
Okay.
cool, which is
Yeah.
great. But most of the time, who do I want to become is more important than the why. It should come before that why. It should be, who do I want to become? Do I see myself actually becoming an investor? And what does that entail? What happens on those days where it's not sexy anymore? On those
Uh,
it's not fun. On
right.
those where things aren't working in my favor. What do those days look like? And who am I going to become in that moment? Am I going to become the person that just quits?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to my podcast. I have an amazing guest for you today. This is Mr. Irving Moya. He has an incredible story and he's been a long friend, and I could not contain myself to be able to share his story with you. So let's get moving on that. Let's start with, I don't know, should we start with how we met? Oh no, we met ironically, but our stories actually kind of started the same with the whole seminar that we attended. So tell me how you got going into what it is that you do right now.
Sure, definitely. Well, first of all, congratulations on getting your podcast. Let me start by saying that. Yeah, we've known each other for some time, and we met at a seminar. So I'm an ex-army guy that, just like many married dudes, one day your wife comes home and says, "Hey, I signed us up for this workshop," and you're like, "What the?" Wasn't expecting that. Not something I had planned out. Not something I even thought about. Um, Luckily for me, right, my wife kind of thought ahead, was thinking ahead, and so I was 5 years before I retired. I was in the Sacramento area as an Army recruiter. Went to this workshop in San Francisco, and it's like most people. Sometimes people come to those because they aren't thinking about it, or have been thinking about it for a while, or sometimes it's like me, where your spouse kind of brings you along, and it just turns out to be the right thing. It's not for everybody, as you know. Some people come to these and not sure what they're expecting. For me, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. I just saw it as, well, this is something different. Let me see what they're talking about, and let's see if it's something that maybe my wife and I could do once I retire from the army. And I ended up starting it before I retired from the army. So that's kind of how I ended up in that crazy world, and that's how we ended up meeting at one of those.
Right, another seminar. Now, back in the day, these seminars were promising these things. So tell me what it is that you started with and what that's evolved into in the business that you do.
Yeah, so I started in '07, right before the crash, and just like everybody else, I had that fear of missing out, right? The FOMO. Everybody's making
Mm.
money, and I was like, well, maybe I'll make some money in this. And they started talking about wholesaling and fixing and flipping. It's kind of what I started with, and as most people know, well, I don't know if you know this, but if you've been in real estate long enough, you know that certain strategies work best during certain cycles in the market. What I didn't realize at the time was I thought it was going to be forever fixing and flipping and wholesaling. And I started doing some with my brother, but I didn't realize that as the market was going down, we were buying properties and trying to fix them faster than the price would drop. And
Yeah.
so that kind of worked against us. I learned a whole lot of lessons. And throughout the years, I just learned that one strategy is just not enough. Most people, I know we meet these people that go, I just want to do the one thing. I teach you to do the one thing. I just want the one thing. And it's like, that's like saying, you know what? I want to open a restaurant and I just want to sell one meal. If I could just sell the one meal, everything will be gravy. And it's not how this business works. And so that's kind of how I started. Then I realized I had to switch some strategies. Throughout the years, I've learned different things. Like now it's becoming popular again. Subject twos. Well, that subject two was a big thing in '09, 2010,
Right.
2011, when people had a mortgage, couldn't sell the property. So there's all these strategies that, nowadays people want to call wholesaling astro flipping, or they come up with a new saucy name, and it's all this. Real estate is real estate. Some things definitely changed.
Hmm.
When I got started, there wasn't no such thing as softwares that would help you.
Yeah.
The research, there was no maybe a list broker, but it was really more challenging than nowadays to find certain information. I tell people this and I sound like a real grandpa, right? There was no such thing as Facebook marketing. There was no such
Right.
thing as marketplace. There was no such thing as Instagram. There was no way, no TikTok, none of these tools that podcasts were they just weren't a thing, right? So there was all these things that were kind of working against you, in my opinion. The only downside, I guess, is that now if you think about it, it could also be oversaturated where there's too
Mm.
much, maybe. So I guess there's a balance in everything, but that's kind of how I got started. That was the initials, and then since then I've done other things like creative financing. I've done some notes. I've done some tax liens and deeds. And so all this stuff is just a little, I've learned, and probably you too, right? You and I have kind of evolved in different ways in this business. And it just comes down to being willing to be open to other strategies so that
Right.
when the market shifts, you can also shift. And a lot of people get stuck because I tell people during COVID, everybody was a genius. Everybody was, I'm a genius. I bought a house and people offered me 40, 50, $60,000 above
Up,
what I
up, up, up.
listed. I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm a genius. I'm like, no, you're not a genius. It's timing. Right, not to disrespect them, but it had more to do with timing with their genius. Now that that has leveled out, those same geniuses are probably back at their 9 to 5 because they just didn't think long term, and I see that a lot. I see that a lot. People just think of that low, lottery mindset, just the immediate gratification. Let me just get the quick win, and that's it. And it's a little more than that, you know.
Exactly. They weren't really prepared or even thinking the interest rates were going to go back up to what they've been on an average over the last 20, 30 years. It's like, well, they were pretty
Yeah.
low. And now if you can't just walk into a bank,
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think people don't understand. And you and I, we talk to this with people all the time about financial education. And I know it sounds like a cliche. I know it sounds, well, everybody says that. What does that even mean?
yeah.
Most people don't realize that low interest rates are a tool to be utilized when the economy is weak. And so when the economy got strong, keeping low interest rates made no sense. But for political gain, whichever side you stand on, or whatever
Hmm.
the case may be, think about it. If they go on the news and go, hey, interest rates are going to be 4%, 5%, like you said, it's not like it was never at those rates before, but people are like, oh my goodness, what world are we in? It's like, well, interest rates were supposed to come up. They had dropped historically low because of, right, 2009, 2010.
Right.
That's why they would drop that low. They were not supposed to remain that low. And here we are over a decade later, and people just got used to it.
You're
But
right.
that it's not real. It's not a real number. That's why even now, right? The Fed is saying they're probably not going to lower rates, even though they said at the end of last year that they might lower them 5 to 6 times. And so people have this expectation that they're supposed to always be low.
Mm,
Now, an argument could be made for a lot of things, but in my opinion, it's not that I love the idea that they went up, but it's realistic. And I tell people that sometimes they're like, well, I'll just wait till they go down. Well, here's the way I look at it. You and I both know there's a shortage of inventory by over 3.8 million houses. So if inventory is low and demand is stagnant because of rates, but as soon as they drop them, people are going to rush back to that 40, $50,000 offer. And the only way you're going to get in a house is offering 30, 40, 50 above asking. And
mm,
so you cannot refinance purchase price. You could refinance if I buy it now while it's a little slower and I have room to negotiate because now it's a buyer's market and I buy a house now, I could refinance the interest rate. What I cannot refinance is purchase price.
right.
I bought it for 400,000, 500,000. I could refinance the rate. But if now I have to offer 450 just to get it,
Mm,
and I go to refinance, I can't refinance that amount. I could refinance the interest rate, but I just paid $50,000 above. And so anyway, so there's a bunch of arguments could be made in this business, as you know. And some people, it's not to disrespect anybody, but some people don't take the time to really understand why things happen in a certain way. But
right. Now, these are all really great explanations, and it just proves that you are a doer. But also, there's something exciting about you is that you are also a teacher.
yeah,
So I do know that you're a public speaker. Tell me a little bit about how it evolved from you doing to also teaching.
perfect. So part of it was an accident. I was working with a company. I lived in San Ramon, California. I was working with a company that taught real estate education. I had done some workshops with them. I was still in the army, but they knew of my army background. I did a lot of training in the army, and so one of the coaches got sick, and they're like, "Hey, there's a class in San Jose, and it's a 2 day class, and I need you. Can you go out there and save my behind, so to speak, because my speaker just got sick?" And I was like, I've never spoken on this topic for 2 days. And he's like, well, he kind of talked me off the ledge, right? And said,
Yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
tell me what was your last deal like?" And I said, well, first I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And he goes, well, write it on a piece of paper as we talk about it. And I did. And he goes, put that in slides.
Hmm.
That's your 2 day presentation. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, that's your 2 day class. So we kind of went over a few points. I literally had a very short time to prepare. I was a little bit nervous about it, but I went down and did it. All worked out really well. And so since then, I kind of took on some classes because, as you know, public speaking or training in the army has a little bit of a different feel.
Right.
It's the process is a little different, right? You're
I imagine so.
very direct, right?
Kind of
It's
a
very
captive audience with
yeah,
you guys.
captive audience, yeah. So, so that part was a little bit different, but generally speaking, yeah, that's kind of how I got started in that. And since then, I've worked at a lot of companies, helping them create some of the coaching and training programs in the past. And so I recently started my own business. It's kind of doing something similar.
I love hearing that. Now, tell me, I know you do so many things. What's one thing that's kind of, I don't want to say like the most fruitful, but something you really like pouring your time into right now that's a good return for you?
Well, if return on money is pretty much more passive real estate strategies,
Ah,
right? But
yeah.
part of it is, again, and I'm not knocking fixing and flipping, I'm not knocking wholesaling, but there's a lot that goes into that.
Hmm.
Even though now a lot of what I'm doing, I'm spending a lot of time too. So I'm doing a little bit more educating and a lot more passive, like tax liens and stuff like that. I'm doing more land than I am doing houses these days.
Mm.
So flipping land, buying land, that kind of stuff. So doing a little bit more on that side than on the houses themselves.
These are great things that you're doing. Is this something that if somebody was to come to you, they could become a client of yours and you could go do real estate with them? Or what does that look like? If I just met you and I'm like, I need to know what you do. I want to do what you do. Tell me what that looks like.
So right now, I'm focusing more. So throughout the years of doing this, right? First event I went to in San Francisco, there was about 150 people in the workshop I went to. I'm Hispanic. I'm from Puerto Rico originally, born in Jersey, raised in Puerto Rico, so I'm 100% bilingual. And so what I found was that every time I went to workshops, there might be four people that spoke Spanish, three
Mm.
people, 150. And so recently, what I did is I started a company called Latino Investment Club. It's a little bit different because I didn't want to travel every week. And
Ah.
so I'm doing it more virtual. And so think of a real estate investment club, like you would have a RIA group.
Hmm.
RIA groups tend to meet once a month because I feel like a lot of Latinos are way behind the power curve on learning some of this stuff.
Mm.
I to where I meet with them more than once a month. We do it twice a month. We
Yeah.
do it virtually, and then I created some classes, like virtual classes. Normally, it's more of a do it with the person. I don't necessarily do it for them. So I kind of have two models: one of do it yourself, one of the digital. For some people, that works great, and for some people, they rather have a little bit more interaction, someone they could contact, be part of a Facebook group, community, a private group, and that
Hmm.
kind of thing. So it's kind of what our model looks like. So it's a little different. It's not quite a full-on seminar company, and it's not quite uh, a RIA group, a Real Estate Investment Association. It's kind of a hybrid, is what I did. So I felt that both of them, for someone that's new to real estate investing, sometimes once a month is just not enough support,
Mm.
right? And you're meeting for 1 hour a month. Not to knock those groups. I've been to many of them. I've been a member of many of them, but I felt like for the clients that I was working with, they just really needed, because I have people that been here for a while, and I have people that been here for a short amount of time. They're not sure, that they're not sure even how our financial system works.
Mm.
So that part of it was it's more hands-on. So it's a little bit more work than what I anticipated at first. I've been working really hard because translating things sometimes too, even though I speak Spanish, there's technical terms that there's words in English that don't exist in Spanish. Like I'll give you one brief example.
Yeah, tell me.
The word landlord does not exist in Spanish. It doesn't exist.
Huh.
And so in Spanish, you would have to say owner, but as you know, that's too vague. If I told you, oh, owner of a property, you're like, well, so he lives in it. No, 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 he doesn't live in it. Well, okay, well, what kind of owner? Is it a lot? Is it a house? Is it a building? So now all of a sudden I'm explaining too much. So literally, the translation would be owner of a rental property.
Ah.
So every time you're going to say landlord, owner of a rental property. Um, Same thing with, we take for granted that in English, you just say tax liens once or twice, and then you go liens. They get it. Well, in Spanish, it's like a whole sentence. And so,
Oh,
and
your
so,
work cut out for you translating all that stuff.
yeah. And so it takes a little bit more time. And like, sometimes the the challenge is that some folks, some of it is cultural and some of it is just not understanding or not trusting the process. So that part has been a little more challenging. Like I had someone that thought that if you had a $10,000 credit card and you used it to buy paint, let's say $500 to paint a house, they thought that you would pay interest on 10,000 even though you borrow 500,
Oh,
just because they're not just accustomed to what our systems are, how we leverage financing or et cetera. So all those things kind of take a little bit more patience, time,
right.
effort, and explanation.
What's
Yeah.
kind of your favorite thing that you like to tell? I don't know, some encouragement that you tell to these new people that are coming to you doing deals.
I almost feel like so the encouragement is not to give up. A lot of people give up before they get started.
Mhm.
Part of it is I'm going to blame the TV shows of HGTV and all that. In a nice way. I like watching them for inspiration, but the reality is people don't realize that that's just a TV show.
Mhm.
That it doesn't work exactly like that. And so people want nowadays. It's funny. We tell our kids be patient. Hey, it's everything. Rome wasn't built in a day, but yet we as adults
Right.
give opposite example. We want those immediate results. And there's a lot of, as you know, there's timing, there's process, there's application, there's education. All these things take time. And so for me, I always just don't give up. Don't quit before you start. A lot
Yeah.
of people quit before they start because as soon as they find out, oh, for example, oh well, wait a minute, if I buy a deed, that means I got to pay for the transfer fee. Yeah. Oh well, then I won't do it. I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. You wanted to buy a house to invest, yes, but you got to pay closing costs or transfer fees or you got to pay quiet title fees, right? Because
Right.
it come with a clear marketable title. All of a sudden they're like, "Well, I'm out." I'm like, "What?" So then you really weren't serious about it.
Mm.
People, take the time to think about not. And I know the whole why thing gets thrown around a lot. I think I read recently, your why is important, but your who is more important. In other
Mm.
words, who do you want to become? Because
Right.
your why could be, I want to do it for my kids, right? Which is
Okay.
cool, which is
Yeah.
great. But most of the time, who do I want to become is more important than the why. It should come before that why. It should be, who do I want to become? Do I see myself actually becoming an investor? And what does that entail? What happens on those days where it's not sexy anymore? On those
Ah,
it's not fun. On
right.
those where things aren't working in my favor. What do those days look like? And who am I going to become in that moment? Am I going to become the person that just quits as soon
Mm.
as adversity? Because the why is always going to be there, and that's important. It definitely is. I always tell people that's kind of your fuel, that's your gasoline to keep moving. But you got to really realize who do I want to become first. Same thing like me, like being an army guy sounds like a cool idea for a young dude. But if I never thought to myself, well, who do I want to become? I really want to become a soldier, someone that serves his country. So then those days where the drill sergeant was yelling at me, it's easy to just quit and be like, well, this isn't freaking awesome.
Right.
So anyway, so for everything that you do, you kind of have to think ahead of, okay, what is it I want to really accomplish? And am I willing to do it not when the lights are not on me, when I have no attention,
Right.
days where it kind of sucks, right? As you know, there's days where it's awesome and there's days where it's not so awesome. And on those days, you have to ask yourself, well, how serious am I about this?
Mm.
Because most people go, I'll tinker with it. Let me just do one to see if this works. Well, newsflash, you drive by trillions of dollars in real estate on a daily basis. Mobile homes, hotels, houses, apartments, land, billboards, trillions.
Right.
Streets, and people go, well, does this really work? I'm like, that's like asking, does a restaurant work? Well, it just depends.
Right. That's a really good way to put it.
Did the owner run it properly, right? Did they have the right pricing? Did they have the right product? Are they in the right neighborhood?
Mhm.
Because you go to, just because it's cheap, right? I could go to the Sahara Desert and open a great steakhouse, but it's in the Sahara Desert. It's cheap real estate, maybe, but no one's there. So what's the point of that, right? So you have to,
Right.
people don't always think through the whole process. They just want, how fast. The first question you probably get, and you've probably got this too as a coach, is how fast can I cash my check? And you're like, well, you haven't even started. Well,
Yeah,
what
right.
actually, you're like, hold on, slow down. You don't even understand the process yet. Well, what kind of check? What's the size of it? How big? How fast can I deposit? How fast can I spend the money? It's like, you're not even there yet. You're not
Mm.
there. So, and most people are very impatient when it comes to that. And that's the part that we have to kind of, people don't like it when you tell them slow down,
Mm.
right? Take a breather. because they want, oh, well, the next guy that tells me that promises the fast result, that's where I'm going. Okay, well, good luck with that.
Good luck with that, right?
Yeah, good luck
This
with
is
that.
all such really great information. If there's one thing that would help you in your business right now, like what's that next thing? Like anything maybe of service that I can help you with, or anybody that's listening that could pour into you. What does that look like?
For me, we're in the growth phase of our company. It's a newish company, right? We just started at the end of December. If you know of anybody that really wants to learn some of this stuff, if they just even want to just follow us on social media, it's Latino Investment Club. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on Facebook.
Nice.
I just started a YouTube channel. Don't judge me yet. Don't have a whole lot yet on YouTube. Working on that. I'm working on building that, but it's Latino Investment Club. Right now, we're focusing all on Spanish speaking clients. So if you're not Spanish speaking, don't take it personal right now. I was going to work on, I was debating between doing a thing for veterans
Ah,
or for Hispanics, and that, because as a lot of times you kind of have to pick your niche. You can't be, unfortunately, you can't serve everyone. You got to kind of find what's my niche and who am I going to serve.
mm-hmm.
And ones I have obviously an affinity to both. I saw a massive need. I don't know if you. I'm a data geek, and so I was reading recently. Right, the average American, native to the U.S. On average has about 170 something thousand dollars in wealth.
Hmm.
The average Latino family has about 6,000.
Oh,
So
wow.
massive discrepancy, and I was like,
Yeah,
well, again, if I could help a few families change some things for them, then that's kind of what my goal is right now.
that's a great, like you identified that there's a need and you're going to go out and fill it. And that's incredible. I appreciate your time so much. How could people get a hold of you if they really just loved this and they want to talk to you about anything like that you've talked
Um,
about?
One of the easiest things is honestly just if you go to my website, it's just Irving, which is just like the city in Texas, Irving, and Moya, Moya.com. Just go to irvingmoya.com. You can see my website, talks a little bit about my story, and kind of some of the things that I do. It's just a generic website that kind of just explains to people kind of what I do and stuff like that, or what I've done in the past, and gives them a better idea and ways to contact me.
That is awesome. Well, one thing I forgot to say, and that we all are saying it and thinking it, is thank you for your service. I know it's a
Uh,
lot to be in the army and do that gig. And I love that you've taken everything you've learned over the years and you're giving back with all of that. Thank you so much for your time. And I am going to sign us off.
All right,
Bye for
thank
now.
you. Wish you the best with the podcast, right? And let me know if there's anything I could do to help you grow it as well. Your following and all that. All right.
Oh, perfect. Love
Thank.
it.
No, thanks, Tiffany.